Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I'd like to begin these comments by a vote of thanks for several individuals and organisations in the spirit also of getting the message out there to our communities that they should be proud, in fact, that we did reach across labels and political divides to address this situation. And so, as the Deputy Prime Minister mentioned, I want to thank him for all of the communications that we engaged in, more than we were with our wives, I think, at the time. And it's always been that way between us. We shared some of the same turf with the vagaries of redistributions. I'm the proud custodian of the Tim Fisher walking stick for the Tumba Trek, which we hope will continue into our tortured landscape in the future. But thank you for being responsive and taking on board the ideas that we've passed on. And many others, of course. Good friend, the member for Gippsland, another neighbour down there across the border. Even if you are a Mexican, you're not a bad bloke. Thank you for all your efforts. Member for Fadden helped me out with the Bega Centrelink issues that we faced, and others who've reached out, like the member for Ford. Really appreciate your care and concern, and of course my good friend, the member for Barara, you're a mensch, and really appreciate your contact as well. And of course my colleagues on this side, particularly those who are severely affected. Member for Macquarie, who has a lot of empathy on this issue, having lost a property in previous fire, and the member for Gilmore, another neighbour who did it extremely tough during all of this. But there's many others besides, and particularly we've talked about our first responders and our fireys. Just an incredibly amazing story, and you know, it was a privilege to have Shane Fitzsimons in this chamber. I've spent a lot of time with Shane visiting our many RFS fire stations on presentation nights, and his is an incredible story. He actually joined the RFS at the age of 15, sort of like I did my time. But more than that, he lost his own father in a hazard reduction burn in the Ku-ring-gai Chase National Park in 2000, along with another 3 firefighters who died on that occasion. So he not only has a wealth of experience and professionalism that he brings to this, but depths and wells of empathy that we've seen demonstrated so beautifully in these past traumatic days. So I really thank him enormously. What he's had to say about these fires, we need to take on board. As he said, hazard reduction is not a panacea, but it is important. And I want to reinforce the comments by the member for Gippsland in relation to cultural burnings. We have a wonderful framework that we can use to exploit taking that further through the Fire Sticks Alliance. I was meeting with the Bega Land Council the other day, and they're ready, willing and able to do that, and so important because a lot of their lands actually border national forest and coastal communities. So it can be of assistance to protect those communities to engage in those cultural burnings, and they understand how you have to tailor those burnings to the landscape. They took me through the differences in terrain and vegetation and the issues around how you manage those burnings. The Fire Sticks Alliance is teamed up with the RFS and more than willing and open-minded, and in fact do embrace the latest science and technology around those issues. I would like to see the funding that was promised to them followed through on at the state level. There is a huge opportunity now for us to take on board these offers and expertise that we can use in the future. But also, there's so many people through the Insurance Council and others that we're now quite practised at this, unfortunately, going back to the Far South Coast fires and others. But the Regional Manager for Telstra, Chris Taylor, I want to pay special tribute to, and his team. They have been incredible. You know, we are in touch on an hourly basis, literally, you know, as I'm sitting here, and his teams have been stretched to the limit. Their infrastructure has been smashed, their redundancy systems tested like never before and damaged because of the scope across the landscape of what's happened. But he has done a tremendous job, and I really want to thank him and his teams who have been out there at personal risk from the very first day of the loss of the telephone exchange in Tumut for other reasons, but it just snowballed from there. And of course, there are a lot of lessons learned to take away from that. Member Gippsland talked about mobile communications. There are so many lessons learned that we have to take on board from this experience about our communications. It was such a central issue. But through that cooperation, we were able to do things like the Senator Murray Watt, who was helping network our team with the Minister for Emergencies, and that was so important. We had situations that I'm proud to say our Shadow Minister for Health helped out with, where we had a facility not far from Cobargo, Nardi House, which deals with profoundly disabled residents. And the problem we had there was, and it's one of these lessons learned we've got to take away from this, there was no real protocol or disaster evacuation system in place for them. Incredibly traumatic, distressing situation for the nurses and the residents of that organisation. And the fact that we were able to reach out and engage with Minister Brad Hazzard, who talked to me directly too at the state level, and he's always been fantastic to cooperate with from my perspective, and weighed in and helped out on that situation. But certainly those are the things we have to do a better job of in the future. We just emphasising the confidence people should take about our cross-party collaboration, the reference group that we've set up across our region that involves Steph Cook and Joe McGurr and Justin Clancy, and of course Andrew Constance and John Barilaro, and my federal colleague Gilmore and myself, doing regular phone hookups with the recovery committees. There's been no labels. We've just all been gathering information about the needs for recovery and better disaster response and feeding that into that process. It's been working very well. So people should feel reassured about that. But across Eden-Monaro we have lost 11 people, and these are people in our kind of communities, as many will understand, that we cannot afford to lose, frankly. Through the Four Corners program, I think people will be familiar with the Salway family story. Aaron Salway told that story last night. And Robert and Patrick were, absolute pillars of that Cobargo community. They come from a traditional dairy farming family that we're very proud of in the Bega Valley. It's my own family's story. But beyond that, since 1870, in fact, they've been there, engaged in that industry, but they have been so involved with their community throughout that family history, the Show Society and all community activities. Their loss is going to be felt deeply by that community, and they'll never get over it. But we hope to do honour to their memory with how we carry ourselves and recover from here. And Janelle, and Aaron, all our thoughts and our heartfelt condolences to you and your family. We will be there for you, as that community is always. But beyond that, of course, we've had a number of other losses that whose names haven't been released in Ballowra, Coolagalite, Batlow, Nerragunda and Cobargo. But there has been reference made to the brave US firefighters in the C-130 crash that took place in Peakview. We've talked about the wildlife issue. Ironically, they were helping to fight a fire in their Two Thumbs Wildlife Trust area, where a lot of koalas and sanctuaries for koalas were being maintained and sustained. Unfortunately, that's all been burnt through, with tremendous loss of the wildlife there. So they're now part of our local family. We embrace them. We will always remember them. And I've talked with local colleagues, and we will establish a memorial to their memory in the Eden-Monaro area. And it just reminds us, I know there's colleagues in this chamber who've served side by side with our US brothers and sisters in many foreign lands in the past. They've been here with us during World War II as well. In fact, the 1st Marine Division's anthem is Waltzing Matilda. And my own family history is every generation has served shoulder to shoulder with the US. And these three brave men, Ian Macbeth, Paul Hudson and Rick De Morgan Jr., have now added their page to what is one of the proudest and most important stories of our nations together. And so I pass through the Ambassador, the grateful thanks of all of Eden-Monaro for their sacrifice during this disaster. We've had across Eden-Monaro over 1 million hectares burnt and counting. Every day, every hour that goes by, more and more. We are a long way from being out of this. This disaster, we're told by the Bureau of Meteorology, and the conditions that have been at the heart of it are likely to continue through to May. we are just gut-wrenched at what we've had experienced. It's been a massive kick in the guts to our entire economy. There is no aspect of the economy of Eden-Monaro that has not been devastated. From the businesses that have been burnt, the loss of the timber industry, to the hit they've taken that will take them 20 years to recover from, our orchard growers in Batlow, maybe 10 years to do recovery from a lot of that damage. These are long-standing hits that will take a huge recovery effort. And to see the courage which those communities are facing that has been, I think, one of the most enduring moments and factors that I will take from this. But that economic hit extends not just to the businesses that have been damaged by fire, but we have had the ring-barking effect. So every business, whether they were near a fire front or not, has been devastated. The loss of the tourists and the damage caused by power outages, etc. And I think of the brave general store owners in Corma, Ellie and Alex, who during the heat of this were just donating their stores and stock to local fireys and the fireys who are engaged in this, suffering damage from power loss and threat from fire itself. Alex stayed behind at one moment during the evacuation to fight the fires to save the general store, but it has suffered some damage, but not enough to qualify for the insurance that would normally kick in. So they are crying for help, for quick-hitting action that will assist all these small businesses, and many suggestions have been passed, including perhaps tax relief for people engaging in accommodation in fire-affected areas, taking holidays. It's something we need to look at, a whole range, obviously, of measures, and we'll be saying, obviously, more about that and talking more about that in the days ahead. But across all 42,000 square kilometres of Eden-Monaro, which is bigger than 66 countries, we have been under siege, as we still are. And with our fireys out there, one of the big takeaways through this mega disaster has been the holes and gaps in the system that we need to take on board as a lesson learned. And I think Mark Binskin is a fantastic appointment. He's a good friend I've served with for many, many years. He's also a constituent, so he'll be empathetic to all of this. But a fine leader and a competent officer, and also a very empathetic person in his own right, wonderful human being. So we need to do a deep strategic analysis of the holes in our system. As part of that, the thanks, I want to acknowledge the ADF proudly, who I'm grateful for the government for responding to our calls to get them out there on a wider scale, because we were so familiar with the sort of capacities that they could bring to this, the skills and relevant capability, the ability of the engineers to do brake cutting with a heavy plant, the combat engineers whose job in life is to do route clearance and mobility facilitation, bulk water carriers, transportation, logistics, so many skills. And the feedback I've had for the community as I move around is that they've found that Defence Force presence so reassuring. And that is a contributor to the mental health issue that we have talked about. So it has been important to do, and the lesson that we need to take away from it is how do we do that better in a more efficient, effective way as soon as we can do it? How do they coordinate that? We've seen some disconnects in issues of communication and coordination. These are just lessons to be learned. There's no blame to be handed around here. There's so much we can do better from what we've learned. A disaster on this scale has really revealed, I think, a lot of the problems that we are facing now with the extension of the fire season. As we know, since the 70s, it's 19% longer than it used to be, and that's just increasing. And so we're overlapping with the Northern Hemisphere with these fire seasons, as we saw in this situation with the fires in California, fires in New South Wales. So we need to be more self-sufficient in our air assets, and we need to take urgent steps for the next fire seasons ahead to make sure that happens. But also we need to explore the possibilities of drone technology. This is happening in Israel and the US as we speak. Things like Project Maven in the US, which is applying military technologies to the disaster response. We can use that during high-risk periods in high-risk areas and around population centres to detect early as possible ignitions so we can vector to them before they become mega disasters, then deploying air assets and rapid response teams and the like. These are key prevention approaches that we can possibly take. So I would urge that we do look at that in this process of review that we're about to launch into. But we do need a national plan that embraces all this, and hopefully that will emerge from the process that we're about to launch on. I will also comment on the climate change issue, because it is a matter of bipartisan position that climate change is real, that there is a human-induced factor here in that issue. That's a matter of bipartisan position. We agree wholeheartedly, I believe, across this chamber on the steps that we need to do to embrace for mitigation and response for what we know are going to be worsening conditions with each year that passes. But what I would also urge is that across this chamber now, and I'm begging and pleading for this on behalf of my tortured, bleeding region, that we work across this chamber, perhaps, and this is just me speaking, that we create a mechanism for forging bipartisan policy for what more we need to do on climate change, and how we can then take that to improve our advocacy internationally to get this done, so that we can give our fireys a fighting chance into the future. And look, I'm talking to them now, getting feedback where they say, look, Mike, our team, our brigade our record for rotations has been 4 weeks. We're out there for 8 weeks now. We are buggered. The numbers are just not there to respond to these mega disasters in our RFS structure. One of the things we're going to have to do is review the whole framework, the whole model for how we respond, how we can incentivise volunteers into the RFS, how can we support them better. And I've suggested things like looking at that ADF reserve structure that we may be able to wrap around them to help them and to incentivise voluntary participation in this scheme. But they need a lot of help, and they need funds restored to them, and obviously mental health support and support to those stations across the region. I've noticed so much logistic and other support they really do cry out for. And I'm very proud to say that our Queanbeyan RSL branch, I've asked them to invite our fireys to participate in the next Anzac Day parade, which is happening. And I know they're doing that in Tumbarubba, and I urge all of our fellow RSL branches to invite their fireys to march with them. I know as veterans we're going to be very proud to have them alongside us. The sacrifices they have made well and truly earn that honour. But to honour that memory particularly, I think it's incumbent on us, as well as all these practical measures, to tackle this strategic issue for the future. And I'm just urging us to go forward on this. It's happened in every other OECD country. Boris Johnson's out there calling for zero net emissions by 2050, reaching out to Australia to do more, hosting the next COP. Will be talking to us about that. It doesn't need to be about politics, it needs to be about the facts. And I'm hoping that we begin this analysis, as New South Wales Inquiry is doing. They're having a scientist in there. Let's get the facts and the projections on the table. Listen to our agencies, Bureau of Meteorology, CSIRO, Academy of Sciences. Those are the people we've got to listen to. Get the facts right, up front, and then go forward. That is sound military procedure. We call it the appreciation process. You start with objective facts, you go through a process that eliminates subjectivity, and you get to an objective result. I'm begging you to engage now in that sort of process. And finally, to finish, Deputy Speaker, I could not be more proud of this community, Eden-Monaro. They have shone in this. They have discovered wells of inner strength and compassion and love for each other. That has brought me to tears as I've been out there amongst them. And that is the strength of this country. That is what's the base of our voluntary spirit. And we should all be proud of that, but we should all pay tribute to it by responding now as we should. What we do now will define us to future generations, and we must honour that spirit that exists in our rural communities.